Happy Friday, folks. And wow, have I got a juicy one for you today. I was in Eddie Hobbs' Counterpoint studio, and he's released the full interview we did on the changes in the IPCC to RCP 8.5. And we also went on to discuss a lot more around this sensitive topic. Yeah? So the first clip I'll just show you is an intro about RCP 8.5 and how important it is. Guys, it's the biggest news in science of a weather nature, shall we say, since the 90s. So here you go.
Now, Ivor, before we get into the joys of what's coming in 2028, and you've been looking at it and I've been looking at it, let's start with what's happening this minute, because something very substantial is after happening in the world of the UN climate models that hasn't got an ounce of coverage in any of the Irish mainstream media at all, which is quite extraordinary, but for reasons we'll get into. So what's exactly happening?
Well, yes, the IPCC has just admitted quietly, and by the way, it's not just Irish media, no international media are covering this, which I would arguably say is the biggest news since the 90s in climate modelling, and no one will touch it. So basically, they're admitting that their climate scenarios based on modelling and RCP 8.5 scenario specifically, which has been used for decades by all the media to scare the living daylights out of us and our children, they're now admitting that it's implausible. So they're quietly dropping it from the record.
Implausible. Implausible is a lovely word. I mean, it covers a lot. But is this the same stuff then that drove St. Greta Thunberg and Al Gore to the heights that they reached internationally in terms of scare and all the paint that went on, all the artwork throughout Europe? It's that one, is it?
Yes, essentially. So all of the crackpots and the climate kind of pseudoscience people who promote it always leveraged RCP 8.5. And it was predicting, 4 degrees by the end of the century, and it was the high-end prediction modelling. For instance, it was assuming things like more than all the coal on the planet would be burnt in the next few decades. And it assumed, well, a whole load of absurd stuff. But it served its purpose. It was used for the political summaries, that from the massive IPCC reports that flowed out all the science. That pieces of that were selected for political and media. And the media then were able to use RCP 8.5. Now, it has been argued by people in the IPCC that they had really, quite a while back, not really used this implausible scenario. It wasn't really being leveraged. But that's not true.
That's a lie, yeah.
That's a lie. Because 6 years ago to 3 years ago, there were 17,000 published papers referencing and using it. And from 3 years ago to now, there were 16,000. So in other words, it's just been blanket used. And that's the way propaganda works. People always use the juiciest stuff when the media want to get clickbait. They want to give scary stories for their own financial interest. And the politicians want control. Was it ever thus? So they use the scariest scenarios in order to get the people to comply with whatever they want to do.
What knavery, eh? Well, we then go on, amongst many other things, the link to the full interview is down below, to discuss the actual modelling, right? Because modelling could do whatever you wanted to do, or whatever the funders wanted to do. So let's just have a quick look at their modelling.
Can you just walk us through that?
So just on the left is a sample published paper more recently, which acknowledges and verifies this. But on the bottom left, came from Professor John Christie, a brilliant man who's been an atmospheric climate scientist for probably a half century. And this was in a deposition to a congressional type hearing. So you can see there, the green and the blue are balloon and satellite measurements of temperature. So you can see from 75 to 2015, almost a half century, we're only going up around 0.2 degrees Celsius, 0.2 and a bit. But what you'll note is the red line, the models from the IPCC, which started off reasonable. They started off reasonably, and they weren't too much above reality. But then around 95, the pressure was put on. And you can see that their models began to predict outlandish increases that bear no relation to reality. And on the right-hand side, you see it in another form. The observations there, a little over 0.1 degrees Celsius per 1979 to 21, and then various models in red X's, and the average being the purple X on the right.
Later in the discussion, we talk about China, because if there's a real problem or a crisis, well, the Pareto principle says you got to look at the biggest, factors, the biggest emitters. But what about China and India and all the others? Let's take a look.
What's that telling me?
Well, in terms of billions of tons, obviously Ireland, you can hardly see it down the bottom because we're irrelevant. So even if the climate pseudoscience was correct, let's just say it was, right? Ireland would still be irrelevant, even within that scenario. The UK, you can see there, obviously they have a lot more people, and the European Union overall. But China blows away the effect of even the European Union, never mind Ireland. And you can see there, that's uncontested, that's the data. But because it's kind of essentially a hoax, the whole thing, the media will never refer to China. So if the problem was real and severe, right, the media would all be talking about China because they blame China for everything. They even blame it for coronavirus, right? But they never mention China. Why not? You can draw from that the reality.
Yeah, because it would undermine the whole propaganda side. But
Scamsters, eh? I mean, it's just a farce when you look at it. It really is funny in a way, in a very sad way. Now I'll just show one more clip from later in the discussion, and it's about bureaucracies, bloated bureaucracies. And many people are astonished that this thing can keep going. And they wonder, are they all frauds, the scientists? And they're actually not. So I explained some of the psychology and how these things work, and I hope you find it interesting.
But the reason that these things go completely out of control is the same reason bureaucracies grow until they become bloated. And then you have a lot of profiteering members and corporates who are making money. You have all the scientists in the IPCC whose very raison d'etre, the only reason they exist and are funded is if there's catastrophe coming. So it always naturally will go to not direct fraud from any of the scientists. A lot of them, you'll never convince a man of something if his salary depends on him not being convinced. So a lot of it is subconscious. They go along to get along. And they can't really come out and speak truthfully because they'll lose their jobs and they have mortgages. They have futures to protect. That stuff's very personal. So you have tens of thousands of scientists that literally will be vilified and lose their grant money and their jobs if they even begin to question this. And when you set up an environment like that, this stuff started with the Rockefellers in the 50s, and a lot of the funding came from Rockefeller and other kind of globalist banksters. But when you got to the 90s, they kept funding and funding and funding and making it clear, unless you toe the line that we have a catastrophe coming, your funding's gone. And they demonstrated that with many individuals.
Well, the data there clearly shows that the whole thing just became politicized. It was no longer about science. Well, it was given up, really, wasn't it, around the mid-90s?
Well, there you are, folks. Just a little taster of our great conversation. I really enjoyed this one myself. So do drop to the link down below. Go to Eddie Hobbs' YouTube channel and look at the full discussion. It's free for you there. And you should also subscribe to Counterpoint and Eddie's channel. It's superb. Last quick thing, we've got our We Love Our Heart conference coming up this weekend. Well, not this one, next weekend, 30th, 31st of May. And I'm just showing on the screen now the actual schedule. Not fully closed at this stage, but pretty much there. So we have, as you can see, a load of fantastic brilliant speakers in metabolic health, heart disease, weight loss, and all the stuff that's really important to avoid chronic disease and live long, healthy, productive lives where we contribute as much as we can to society, of course. So the link is down below to We Love Our Heart. It'd be great if you could support us, keeps the train on the track. It's going to be a fantastic weekend, and there's an option to have all the recordings too and live Q&As. And we did one around 5 years ago. This is the anniversary, and it's going to be great. We already got some great numbers in, but we'd love to make it as successful as possible. So that's it, folks. I'm going to keep getting things out on YouTube. I had a bit of a gap there a couple of weeks back, but I'm going to get back on track now. I've been very busy with psychology, actually. I'm becoming a master applied psychologist this year, and it's quite a lot of work. But I think it's going to be great because I want to start bringing incredible tools and techniques to gain mental strength, self-regulation, and social awareness, social influence. So we all have room to grow, and with the tools I've discovered through ecology.com, the scope for growth is unbelievable, and it will help huge numbers of people deal better with the nasty globalist banksters, the Epstein class, the parasites, which try to curse our lives and undermine our families and our society. But we need to develop more mental strength, less despondency, and more actual truth, and be part of getting truth out there to overturn these scumbags. Okie doke, guys. See you next time.